With limited inventory due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we're seeing a rise in the use of escalation clauses, which is also increasing the number of issues that we're starting to see and the questions that people have.
So in light of this new information, this week we revisit escalation clauses.
Welcome back to Talking Real, brought to you by the Oklahoma Association of Realtors. This is episode 125. Man, Nabil.
125.
These landmark numbers really get me.
I know.
I just get excited about 125 episodes. Wow. It's like 2.5 years in. Nabil, how's your day?
Oh, I was just about to say, how's your day? Let's switch it up on 125.
Man, my day, I'm kind of worn out. It's been a long day. I've been pretty busy today, So it's been a lot of work. The last week's been quite busy for me, which I like. That's good. It's good to be busy, but a lot going on right now. So definitely keeping quite busy. A lot of computer work, a lot of meetings, those kinds of things. So how about you? How's your day?
Going pretty well.
Good.
Been pretty busy.
Yeah.
We're recording pretty late today.
We are. It's like I said, we've been busy and it's weird. This week we're at a little bit of a loss for what we could talk about. We had just, for some reason, we had that like writer's block. We had podcaster's block.
Talker's block.
But we're actually going to bring you I think this is an important episode.
I think so. It was one of those things where we're like, yes, that's what we should talk about.
Yeah. But before that, want to just mention, I hope everybody is still out there taking some COVID-19 related precautions. We're obviously seeing a little bit of an increase in some cases going on out there. The bottom line is, early when this started happening, we put out a variety of information. I did a little Facebook Live thing, if you remember. And one of the things we talked about is making sure that as a realtor, you are talking to your clients about these issues. So with your buyers and sellers, having a conversation with them to gauge their comfort level and what their expectations are to either look at houses or sell their house in the midst of everything going on, because different people are looking at this in different ways. And I think that realtors need to make sure they're respecting their clients' wishes and helping to carry those out. So sellers may have particular things they want buyers doing. Buyers may have particular things they want to do to feel comfortable, and just make sure that you're having those conversations still to make sure people are comfortable. Obviously things are opened up a little bit and we're somewhat living life back to normal, but make sure you're still having those conversations and keeping people comfortable with where things are. So just want to kind of throw that out there, that we're still remembering that it is still going on and people are having different feelings about it. So just have those conversations.
Yeah. And especially with recent news.
Absolutely.
Right. With the spikes and all that stuff. So it's
so
going to be back on people's minds. So.
Yeah. So just have those conversations with your clients.
Yep.
Good stuff. This week, we're actually revisiting a topic that we talked about 2 years ago.
Just actually a little over 2 years ago.
A little over 2 years ago. So we talked about this in 2018.
And it's funny, when we were talking about this, we were like, let's talk about escalation clauses. And we're like, we had done an episode on this before, and both of us were like, wow, that was 2 years ago.
Yeah, we didn't realize it was quite so far, because we talked about this originally in episode
17,
and now at 125. So yeah, you can tell that's been a little while. And we need to revisit it. Why? Right? There are some changing feelings on it and some new information. And we're in a moment right now where inventory is so low and so competitive in many cases that there has been a significant amount of information and more escalation clauses being used and people experiencing them more often. So I think we need to have a frank conversation about escalation clauses and some information that maybe I have that a lot of other people don't necessarily have, that they need to be aware of and to help understand what's going on. And so this would kind of modify a little bit what we talked about on episode 17.
Right. So we are revisiting the information that we gave you initially.
Yes.
But 2 years down the line.
Yeah.
So first, before we get into this, in case someone's not 100% aware of what an escalation clause is and how it works, give us a little breakdown.
Right. So an escalation clause is a term in an offer of a contract that, and there's different ways to write them, but in a very basic way would say something like, I will pay you $100,000 for this property, or $500 more than the highest offer. Okay, that's just like the very with bare bones kind of way that would look. So that says I'm going to give you $100,000, but if somebody else has offered more money than me on this property, I will pay $500 more than them. Sometimes you will also see them with a cap. So that would say I'll pay you $100,000 or $500 more than the next offer, but no more than $110,000, something along those lines, so that there's a cap. People are doing them in different ways. And there could be other things that go along with it, but that's just the basic gist of what an escalation clause would look at. And again, we're seeing that because we have this limited inventory situation, I think primarily due to COVID-19. And so the buyers are still out there looking, but there's not very many houses. And so they go on the market. And I mean, I've heard stories lately of people saying that they're having, put a house on the market, and over the course of a weekend, they're getting 20, 25 offers on the property. I mean, it's insane going on right now. So, and again, some of these offers coming in are having escalation clauses. And so we need to have this conversation about what that means and how that's treated under Oklahoma law and licensing issues. There's just a host of issues that, again, we need to amend episode 17.
So let's jump right into it. What are the issues?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is primarily, well, let me back up here. Let me tell you where this came from, right? So I go to all the contract forms committee meetings with the real estate commission. Okay. We talk about the standard forms that are out there and available, and the topic of escalation clauses came up. And with the real estate commission, they have had at least one instance, maybe more, where somebody has filed a complaint alleging a real estate licensee has violated the code because an offer was submitted with an escalation clause. And the reason for why the complaint was filed is we'll talk about it a little bit later as to one of the other miscellaneous issues that can come up. But the topic came up of just generally escalation clauses, and we have a little bit of an issue in Oklahoma licensing law. Okay. So there's kind of two issues. One is an escalation clause a legal, bona fide, enforceable offer? And the second one is, as a licensee, should you be involved in a transaction where an escalation clause is being used? And so those are kind of the two initial issues that we need to talk about to kind of kick things off.
All right. So
which one do you want to start with, Nabil?
I'm interested more in is an escalation clause enforceable, or is that offer enforceable?
Right.
Because as a bystander, I would assume it's a contract. It says something. It should be enforceable.
Yeah. And this is kind of an interesting legal gymnastics kind of issue you have to go through.
Jeff's favorite exercise.
Yeah. Because there's kind of these two concepts in contract where you have an offer to an actual offer, right? An offer that I'm submitting, and if you accept it, then we have a binding agreement.
It's locked in. We're done.
Right. The second thing that you have to look at is it instead an offer to solicit an offer, basically, like an offer to negotiate. So when somebody posts their property for sale, for example, right? So for sale, and here's the list price, that is not an offer. Okay.
That's a suggestion.
That's an invitation to negotiate.
Right.
That's an invitation to submit an offer.
This is what I value this thing at. What would you give me?
Right. So that's where if somebody comes and they say, well, you asked $100,000 for the property and I brought you an offer that says $100,000, we have an agreement because that's what you said it was. Okay, well, that listing price is not an offer itself. That is an invitation to negotiate. That's an invitation to solicit offers. Okay. And so the question is an escalation clause, because it does not have a specific purchase price, is that just a re-invitation to negotiate, or is that actually an offer? Okay, we are like into the weeds right now.
I can see why you call this gymnastics.
But this is a very important piece, because then the issue would be, so if somebody submits an offer with an escalation clause and the seller signs it, theoretically, if it's not a bona fide enforceable offer, the seller could say, oh, well, it wasn't ever even an offer in the first place. We don't have a fixed price, so now I can get out of it because we haven't fixed a price yet. Right. So there's like weird things that would happen if it's not.
But then on the flip side, one could argue that your price is fixed dependent on the previous offer that your clause escalates.
Right. So the issue here is, again, is that a specific enough price? Is it definite enough that it would be enforceable?
Right.
The general consensus that I have found is that it is. Okay, if you've got your escalation clause done correctly, the general consensus amongst legal scholars, to the extent any of us are scholars on anything, is that it would be enforceable. And that's sort of based on the idea of, can a judge determine, if it had to go to court, can a judge determine whether the parties actually agreed on a sales price? Okay, and based on the information that would be available, that, okay, I've made an offer, it's got a minimum, maybe it's got a maximum, and it's got this clause that references a separate offer. Could a judge take all that information and all the facts and the documents and fix a price? And the answer would be yes.
Yes. And this just popped into my mind, but you wouldn't be able to do that when the offer was submitted.
Valid point.
Right? Because you don't have anything to compare that to.
Right. And this is one of the issues that arises. You raise a very valid point.
Thank you.
But right. So it would be potentially at the time the seller accepts it, that would be what you would reference, right? So, okay, so the seller accepts it at 5 p.m. on Tuesday. Okay, what was my highest offer on Tuesday at 5 p.m.? That would be what I would use to fix it perhaps, right? But yes, you reveal one of the problems is, okay, what if I get an offer that came in after that one, or one that came in but then it expired before the escalation clause one expires? These are all difficult questions that there aren't answers to, and reveals one of the many hosts of issues with using an escalation clause. It's one thing if they all came in on Saturday at noon and you got 3 offers together, one has an escalation clause, and they all expire Sunday at noon. Okay, well, this is easy to deal with, right? They're all on the same timeline, but in the real world, that's not always the case. And so if somebody says, well, I want, to consider this offer that had already expired or something along those lines, or was withdrawn by the offerer at some point, well, now can you use it as the basis for an escalation? Like, this is one of the things that makes this just so difficult, is there's so many what ifs. Okay. It's not simple. It's not black and white. It's not always clean.
Right.
And that's one of the big issues that we have that are starting to reveal themselves, okay, is that I submit this offer and I'm having to use this other outside information. Again, is it enforceable? I think that if you went down to court and you had to sue somebody and say, this is a bona fide valid offer that's enforceable, would a judge say, yes, I think that it is, and we can fix the price, and here's what the price would be based on the information available? I think the answer to that is yes, which would make it enforceable. But again, legal minds have differed on that. So I've heard different perspectives. So the first issue is, there is a chance that a judge could say this contract is not enforceable because it didn't have a fixed price at the time that it was entered into. And so it's possible that could happen.
It depends on how they look at it.
Right.
Because it leaves it open to interpretation.
Exactly. My opinion is that it would be enforceable, but I have talked to other attorneys who say, I'm not sure that would be enforceable. So take that into account when you are weighing whether an escalation clause should be used or not in a particular transaction. When advising your clients, there are a myriad of issues that would arise. That's just happens to be one of them, the enforceability of it. Again, I think it's enforceable, but people have disagreed with me. And so judges could disagree with me as well. And that's the risk that you run into at the outset, is the enforceability issue. So I wanted to make sure that's clear, because in episode 17, I unequivocally said, yes, it's absolutely enforceable. And maybe that was a little too strong based on the information I have now in my sort of modified version and an opinion of kind of what's going on with them. So that's sort of, episode 1 of what we're dealing with right now. Piece 1.
Yeah. So, but regardless of its enforceability, is it legal?
Yeah. So like for a realtor to use it.
For a realtor to use it.
Yeah. This is the other issue, and this is more a licensing issue, right? So there is a rule that it is a violation of the real estate code and rules to procure the signature to a purchase, offer, or contract which has no definite purchase price. Okay, I'm like pulling out the important pieces. It's a violation to get a signature on a contract or an offer that does not have a, quote, definite purchase price. The issue's been raised that does an escalation clause have a definite purchase price? Now, I have made the argument in the past, and this is, I think, what I said in episode 17, is that if you can fix the price based on information available, then and it would result in a specific definite price.
Without any X's.
Right? Without having to make something, like you've got either the original price offered or the escalation amount, which is based on another offer, but you can fix a definite price based on that. It's not a blank line, right? It's not I want to buy your house with no price in it. You can fix a specific price if you had to go to court and establish it. My interpretation was that, yes, I think that meets the definition of a definite purchase price. Not to mention, if you take the position that an escalation clause is legal for a buyer and seller to use, why would it not be legal for then a real estate licensee to represent the parties that are using
Right,
that?
because you're facilitating that.
Right, exactly. But the issue is the real estate commission could take the position, and I'm not just speculating here that they really could take the position that an escalation clause is not a definite purchase price, because it's not a specific point. And here's how that would happen. So the real estate commission, again, I said they think they have had like one complaint submitted that involved an escalation clause. I don't know if any action's been taken on it. I don't think that it is. But if this becomes an increasing issue where they are taking the position that, and the view that consumers are being harmed, and we'll talk about what that looks like, but that consumers are being harmed, and their duty as the real estate commission is to protect the public, then it starts to look like an escalation clause may not be a definite price. They also raise the point that, look, if we had to go ask the attorney general for an opinion, and that would be binding of, is this type of contract offer a definite purchase price within the meaning of our rules, there's a pretty good chance that the attorney general's office would weigh in and say, no, we don't think that's a definite purchase price, which means if you as a licensee procure the signature on an offer that has no definite purchase price or an escalation clause, you're in violation of the real estate rules, which means you could then be sanctioned and whatever else flows from that, right? So monetary penalties, so on and so forth. And so that there is the next risk you have to consider of, is this a good idea for people to be using? Because right now the real estate commission has not said yes or no on whether it is legal within the meaning of these rules. But that day could be coming.
They're still trying to figure like that out, depending on the cases and what they're seeing in the market and
exactly
everything else.
And the reason this becomes an issue is I am aware of at least one instance where an escalation clause was used. It did not have a cap on it. And because of the extraordinary nature of the offers that were coming in, they said, I'll pay $100,000 for the house. And it escalated something like $51,000 because it went so much over list price.
Wow.
In this aggressive bidding, because everybody knew there were a lot of offers. And so the person who won was somebody with an escalation clause, but never imagined that it would go up so much. But now they're in a contract and they felt like they were not protected because the escalation clause went up so high.
So 2 questions on that. Obviously, the escalation clause didn't have a ceiling.
Correct.
Do clauses need a ceiling? I guess not.
This is why another reason why these are difficult, because if you put a ceiling in, right, what's the downside here? Well, in your negotiations, you have just tipped your hand to the seller that says, I'm willing to pay up to the ceiling.
Right. And this is something we talked about in episode 17.
Right.
Where you're saying, I'll pay up to $120,000. And then the seller's like, well, why don't I just kind of negotiate with you to make you pay $120,000?
Right. So that's the downside to the cap on it, or the ceiling on it, is that, well, you just told them how much you're willing to pay.
Right.
And maybe that's a problem. But the good side of a ceiling is you're not going to have one escalate like into the stratosphere. And now you've got a buyer that's holding the bag on this deal that's like, holy smokes, I had no idea that this was gonna be like this. I thought maybe it would go up $5,000, not $50,000. Mm-hmm. And so who are they going to be mad at when that happens? Not the seller. It's not the seller's fault.
Right.
It's,
why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you stop it?
Right. Did you adequately explain the implications of what was going on there? So that is also the other piece that comes along with it, is how are you advising your clients if they're going to use one? Do they fully understand the implications? And have you thought through what's going to happen with that escalation clause in the various, scenarios that could come up? Okay. So that's one of the harmful things that could occur based on it.
And then question 2 on that was, say it escalated whatever 50% of that price that was. Usually if someone's getting financed, they might not have a 50% margin to play with.
Right.
So what happens if that's higher than what they're allowed to finance or are given the means to do so? Right.
And so if you're using the financing addendums, then if they can't qualify for that, well, then now the seller or the buyer gets to terminate the contract because they don't qualify for financing at that level. And so that's sort of the other piece there then, is you use it, it escalates to this stratospheric price increase. And now the buyer says, well, I can't qualify for that, so now I'm out because I don't qualify. So there's a risk in accepting that kind of offer as well, when the seller's like, hey, that's a great deal, I'm going to get all this extra money.
Right.
But maybe not, because now the buyer can't qualify. So you've got a little bit of a question mark there of how that would go down. So all the difficulties involved right there.
Right. And I'm sure there are a couple of other issues that have come up in these, and you can see in these.
Yeah, absolutely. Other issues I've heard have come up multiple times with people are appraisal issues. And now this is just going on in general because there are, again, the lack of inventory, prices are kind of shooting up. And so what people are agreeing on, because buyers are willing to pay more for a house because they want to get the house, and this is just, especially prevalent with an escalation clause, is that we now are running into appraisal issues. And so you got to be thinking forward to that as well, that is this going to appraise at this price, and explaining to your sellers and the buyers and everybody else what happens in the event that this doesn't appraise. If you're going to accept this, you need to understand there may be an appraisal issue, and then you got to deal with that. So that's another one of the issues that seems to be popping up lately with escalation clauses, and really just, contracts in general, but we're definitely seeing it on some of these escalation clause ones.
Because they're inflating the price.
Yeah. Other issues that we're looking at is, like what if there are multiple escalation clauses in a transaction? I think somebody told me they had one property that they received like 20, I think I mentioned at the beginning, 2025 offers, and somebody in a similar situation that had multiple escalation clauses. And so the question is, what do you do there? And again, that's just a difficult situation, and perhaps you got different ways to handle it, but you need to think through how to do that.
Which one supersedes the other?
Right. So do you just pick one to negotiate with, or do you then solicit highest and best and tell them like, we're only accepting a specific amount, highest and best, because we have multiple escalation clauses? There's different ways you can handle that, but that certainly creates then a big question mark of, okay, well, which escalation clause wins, right? So that's another difficult situation.
The one with the highest cap.
Yeah. And so, right. And so I think that in episode 17, I probably didn't give that enough weight on the difficulty of that. And so that's a problem there. The other one is like the proof of the highest offer, where some people are, they haven't built it in. They said, well, I'll pay, $500 more than the highest offer, but they didn't build in a requirement, and you have to give me proof of that highest offer. And so there's like some weird scenarios that are going on there.
Some ethical questions there.
Yeah. So, those are some other issues that are popping up, but I think that it was worth having a conversation to say, look, there's an argument to be made. It's not enforceable. I disagree with that, but you need to be aware of it. And also the licensing issues with OREC, which I think are a big deal, that are evolving. It's unset, right? This is not settled at this point. So, and we are starting to see some complaints come into the Real Estate Commission. And so they're going to have to deal with it at some point, it looks like. And so where does that leave us? And again, my position would be that yes, it is a definite price if it can be fixed based on the information available. But again, I can't guarantee that I'm right on that. So there is that issue there on top of some of the other complications that are coming along with it. So, I'm revisiting it here to say you have to use caution and you have to weigh whether this is a good idea or not, and really have some of those tough conversations with your clients about what the good and the bad is of this, and understand that there's a lot of people that really, really don't like it and are unhappy with it. And I've also heard stories of people saying, well, we got this one with an escalation clause, but we just don't like the way that works. And the seller didn't like it and didn't understand it. And so they're just not working with that. They're just choosing not to even counter that offer or anything. So, it's also having some effect to turn people off in certain limited circumstances as well.
But this could get sticky. I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, it's just, exactly. So, I'm not necessarily saying use it or don't use it, but just you need to understand that opinions differ on it, and it is more complicated than we probably gave it credit for in episode 17. So it was worth revisiting because it's popping up a lot right now, and need to understand that there is other things going on in terms of enforcement, those kinds of issues that you need to be aware of if you're going to get involved in that type of transaction. And that my opinion on it may be different than licensing bodies and judges.
Right.
And so, I like to think that I'm right all the time and what I say goes, but that's not always the case. So, yeah. So you got my opinion on it and some additional information with what's going on right now. And so sorry, I can't give you like super definite answers on these things, but sometimes things aren't that clean. But I think you need to go into it with open eyes and make sure that you're very careful in how these things are being used. So that's what I got.
Well, there you have it.
There you have it.
Escalation clauses revisited.
Yes.
And updated for the 21st century. Even though the last one was 21st century.
Yeah.
Well, but still.
Updated for 2020.
For 2020. There you go.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking of.
There you go. There you go.
So if you've been part of an escalation clause in a contract, we would love to hear your experience, whether it was good or interesting.
Right.
So send us an email, podcast@okrealtors.com, and let us know how that went and what happened.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear your stories.
Yeah, always. Stories are the best.
Yeah.
And if you think this information would be useful to someone else, please share this podcast and this episode with said person so they can get all this information about escalation clauses as well.
Absolutely. And don't forget, when you've got those legal questions out there, send me an email or hit us up on the legal line at okrealtors.com/legal. And that's where you can get some of your specific questions, get a little advice and guidance on those. So check that out too.
Yes.
Otherwise, I think that's all we got for today. I probably talked way too long, and this is going to be a hair longer of an episode, so I apologize for that. But we appreciate you coming back every week here on Talking Real, and we look forward to having you back next Tuesday. So until next time, we'll see you next Tuesday on Talking Real.
So would you use an escalation clause?
No. So look, I don't think it's a great idea. I really don't. I mean, I think that it's fine. I think that it complicates things. I think that if you should just come in with your strong offer and make your strongest offer you can and let the cards fall where they may and not try to
save a couple bucks.
Yeah. I mean, cause it comes down to a really complicated thing. And I think that if somebody is that committed to having the property, then you have to show your cards a little bit. So that's where the buyer needs to go to their realtor, and the realtor has a conversation to say, look, let me have a frank conversation to say, my clients are really committed to this. So if you have another offer that's higher that comes in,
Let me know.
Please let me know,
Yeah.
and give my clients an opportunity, to negotiate if you're and if it becomes a multiple offer situation. Like, express, not necessarily, like, get that approval, because you have to have approval to reveal that they may be willing to pay more, but get approval that, look, they're really interested. Please don't count them out. If you get somebody that just comes in with a crazy offer that's much higher, like, let's have a conversation about it, and don't just immediately count them out, because I don't know. They may be, they may be willing to negotiate on it. That's just a risk you have to take, that then they may counter and you pay a little bit more. But if it's worth the buyer to get that particular property, then they have to be willing to risk paying a little bit more to have that happen, and give the authority to their realtor to go and negotiate and let that other party know, my clients are super serious. They really want it. We think this is a good, strong offer. But if somebody's out of their mind with their offer that's coming in, give us a chance to respond. Give us a chance to negotiate. Let's talk about it, because again, my clients really want to get this property, and so we want to have that opportunity. So
Right.
I think it reveals there's issues here.
Yeah, and I mean, just like you said, realtor talk to the seller. Well, I guess they can't like directly talk to the seller, but talk to the other realtor and figure that stuff out. So.
Yeah. So I think there's risks to it. Again, I don't like the idea of saying that it's illegal or that a realtor can't represent somebody without violating the code. I think that's kind of absurd.
But it's like, it's not, because it's like a gray area, right? It's not illegal, right? It's not.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's enforceable. If a judge looks at it, they'd say, look, you guys agreed to this, and I can fix the price. Here's what it is based on the information we have.
Yeah.
How's that not enforceable? But, again, I think it's risky. So do that. And nobody wants to be the test case either, right?
No.
So, and again, you got to write them correctly, and you should probably involve an attorney to write a contract provision if there's not a standard form, because otherwise now you're practicing law without a license, and then you're also going to get sued, and so there's issues, there's risks involved.
You're just putting X+5.
I know. So anyway, that's my opinion. That's just my opinion, not the law or anything else. So take that.